Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Calvert. Tell us a little bit about you and how you ended up as the CEO of DealMaker.
Yeah, so I started out my career on Bay Street in Toronto, did that for over a decade, founded a startups practice when I really saw a lot of that scene becoming more and more popular, more people starting companies. And I really loved working with entrepreneurs and founders. My dad has been a longtime entrepreneur, so you could say it's in my blood. And I saw an opportunity given the niche that I was in the capital markets, where there was a problem with people and how they were getting their businesses funded. There was a lack of access to funding. And when it was happening, it was a cumbersome process and it didn't need to be that way. And so I really saw an opportunity to just help my clients who weren't happy with the experience that they were having. And of course, technology is great for that. So 2018, my co-founder Matt was on Wall Street and we started the company and we had been working on it for a number of years and are really working to help founders get more access to funding digitally using alternative means.
Yeah, it's so cool, and we'll dig more there. But I want to get back to the quote and how it's about taking action and then figuring it out. So, Rebecca, can you tell us about some of those moments, and then also how do you develop the trust that you can always catch yourself when you take those opportunities?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. For me, one of our company values, it's embedded in the way my co-founder and I operate, is always be learning and growing. So constantly challenging yourself, never be satisfied. And we look at that with every aspect of the DealMaker business, right? Every single quarter, we're looking at what we can do to be better than we were the quarter before. What can we do to bring the cost of capital down further for our customers? And that's really how we can disrupt an industry that's previously been very resistant to change. How do you constantly have that attitude towards ongoing learning and growth? Is I really don't view the world. Sometimes people ask me, what are the biggest problems you face, or what are the mistakes you regret the most? And I really don't view the world that way. We really view it from an agile tech perspective. There are a lot of bets or hypotheses we're making. Not all of them are expected to work, and we're just going to double down on the ones that work. And so I think when you view the world through that lens, you're able to pick yourself up from things more, you're able to be more resilient because you have a different expectation than people do when they expect everything to go right or they have a fear of failure. I think that can really stop people from pursuing what they're best at when they have an unnecessary fear of failure. They just shouldn't view the world that way. And if you listen to anything from, Kobe Bryant or any high performance athletes, or Federer's speech recently that's going viral at the Dartmouth graduation, it's really that same philosophy that they have about continuing to improve a little bit more every day.
I love that. And it's so funny. You're the second person today, well, second CEO and founder today. One is the constant growth has been a theme on this entire show for years. And then the other thing was the scientific mindset of testing hypotheses and leaning in. That's the second one today, and it's something. Of course, we use. I call them micro experiments often with my clients to try things and to see if they work. And I love that frame of mind because, yeah, it's just that's the way you innovate and grow, and you get on that continuous improvement mindset.
Exactly.
Yeah, Rebecca, I know you're big into supporting women in growing in their leadership. Can you tell us more about that mission that you're on?
Yeah, I think it really nicely directly aligns with what Dealmaker does as well. We help more diverse founders get funded, right? There's a bit of a blocker in the capital markets in access to funding, which is something we saw. An alternative means of funding create more opportunities to get businesses funded. Like being a founder or an entrepreneur is the hardest job, right? We know that. because we are that. But a lot of people in society, I don't think, really appreciate how many knocks entrepreneurs take day in and day out. And they know that mentality that we're talking about. And I'm sure that's why they're listening, because they say, yep, that's the only way that you can get through it. You have to have that belief in what you're doing. And the hypothesis testing just allows you to even further go after what you need to go after. And so, um, there's so many sharks out there. We're founder first. We're trying to support founders in their mission and give them more control, instead of, sometimes you hear about people losing control to an investor who takes some preference right, or who takes some rights that they don't really understand at the time of the financing. We can really stop that from happening by just having more diverse sources of financing that founders can pursue. So I think that's really important. I think for women or minority founders as well, right? They're going to have a different set of challenges that they go through, and that's fine. That's what they need to be aware of and move through. But alternative sources of capital have proven to be really strong for those groups. So, digital fundraising, over 30% of the capital goes to women and minority founders, versus VC, it's less than 2%. And so, just being aware of those differences in the market and how you can leverage those sources is really important, when you know the specific challenges that you face as a different kind of founder. Maybe it's the way you look or talk, or you don't fit that mold that institutional funding is expecting to see. And you can wrangle yourself and try to fit that mold, or you can also say, look, I'm just going to have less knocks if I go through an alternative path to financing, and I can get on with building my business. For women founders, though, I think a lot of them worry about mistakes or fear of failure even more than they need to. And so a big part of my messaging is always to them, that what we just talked about, don't view it as a failure. Don't worry about it. There was one female founder I was speaking to recently, and she said, well, I'm really mad because if I had structured something differently, I could have made a few $100,000 more last year. And I said, look, you can't look at it that way. You have to look at it that every single thing you're learning and growing is enabling you to make the business even better. Don't worry about coulda, shoulda, woulda. If I had figured this out last year, just worry about keeping on learning, and then the business will keep getting better, and you'll feel a lot better about what you're doing.
It's funny. It's most of it's a mindset game, and it's what we do a lot. One thing, Rebecca, I'd love to ask you about is, of course, we work with a lot of founders, and a lot of them struggle with this transition from the doer to the leader. How did you make that transition?
That is a great question. I'm still making that transition as the company grows. I mean, when I was thinking about coming on today, I mean, it's really one of the biggest challenges we're facing right now as a leadership team, is transitioning from player to player coach to just coach. And in order for the business to grow, you really have to make that transition. But especially as entrepreneurs, I know for a lot of us, doing is how we made the business, and that's how we built the business in the first place. So, like, how do you transition your mindset? In a lot of ways it feels slower, and that is like against my core philosophy. Like, I'm raging against that. I just want to go, go, go. So I mean, we have different phrases. We're constantly reminding ourselves, digging furiously with a shovel is not going to get us there. We need to pause and rent an excavator, and then we're going to dig a deeper hole. Right. So, like, we'll say that to each other. Like, are we digging furiously with a shovel right now? Should we just like think about the excavator for a minute? So we've worked with the scaling up philosophy as well. I'm a huge fan of that book and the way it gives you a framework for the business and helps everyone go, row in the same direction. And it helps you communicate the vision as a leader and not keep changing your mind, because as the organization grows, you need to have everyone rowing in the same direction. And the more you're trying to pivot the business, the harder that's going to be on people. So there's lots of tips and tricks in scaling up that I'm really benefiting from. And we also have an amazing executive coach that we're working with us to help us implement that in the business.
It's amazing, and it's something that it's so common, and that's actually a lot, right? Is like what takes you from 0 to 1 is not what gets you from 1 to 100. And that's where I think a lot of founders get stuck, is in that phase of, we're at 1, maybe we're growing to 2, we're not really sure. And then it's that pivot that needs to be made to just really just explode the growth.
Totally. And it's about like trusting in the people you have around you in a big way because you can't do it for them. You have to trust them to do it and you have to communicate to them to the vision and then coach them on how to achieve it. And that's a big shift for people who have traditionally been doers. But when you have a view towards where you want to take the business, it's the thing that you have to do in order to get to scale.
Amazing. Rebecca, what makes you a unique leader?
That is a good question. I think to me, it's all about innovation. I think that's the most interesting kind of company to work for, where you can be yourself every day and you can have an impact. And you can do that by constantly innovating with those around you. So we have a really team-based philosophy at DealMaker about it doesn't matter whose idea it is. We need to collaborate to come up with the most innovative things that does the best for our customers. It's all about the customer, and these founders are doing the hardest job in the world. So anything we can do to make their lives easier and get them funded, for us, that's what it's all about. I think, I've been told that I'm hard charging and forward thinking. And so we're aggressively setting the terms of the future and doing that on our own terms. And I think that's really important when you're in a position like DealMaker, where you're really trying to disrupt an industry that is generally quite resistant to being disrupted. So for us, that's a unique place to be, where we work with our ecosystem participants, but we're also trying to do something that's very, very different. And a lot of people are very resistant to change in our space.
I hear that a lot. Uh, Now, I just love to ask you, you talked a lot about the team atmosphere and getting those best ideas out there. How do you cultivate an environment where you have that high psychological safety to bring those ideas forward?
Yeah, it's tough because we also have a team of a high performance culture. And so how do you mix those two things where people aggressively want to pursue outcomes, but they aren't doing it by trying to put the person next to them down. When you read about at one point in time Uber's values, and they kind of developed that situation where, because it all was just about winning, people interpreted that and started trying to win at all costs. And so we've always made sure that our values are about winning, but winning as a team, because to me, that's where you get innovation, because people aren't trying to put the person next to them down, they're trying to lift them up. And that's where they can build on each other's ideas and create the best outcome for anyone.
I love that. It's another thing that happens all the time in business. And actually, one of the cool stats, or not really cool, but I mean, narcissists tend to do really well in big political environments because of this exact fact. Is they're willing to take credit where they shouldn't, and they're willing to deflect blame, and so they gain political power very easily. Um, but aside of that moment, Rebecca, what's your biggest passion project, either professionally or personally?
For us, it's about defining our ICP, our ideal customer profile. And as a North Star, as a phase, that really only becomes possible once we've found product market fit. But it's really necessary for us at the growth stage in order to propel us forward into the latter stages of growth. And so that's where we're at as a life cycle, right? Post product market fit, now hone in on the ICP and who that is. I think further to our point of doers, that's a really challenging thing to do when you're just trying to get a business off the ground and make money, especially for founders. Like, I want to help everyone. I want to be everything for everyone because I want to build a really big business. And so challenging yourself to say, no, this is what we're really good at, and this is where we can provide the most value. is requires you to say no to things. And as a leader, you do have to say no to things so that you can point everybody in the right direction. And that is tough as a leader, right? Oh, I can't give people 8 things to do. I have to only give them 3. Like, really? But they can do 8. I'm sure they'll be fine doing 8. But no, if I give them 3 and I give them the right 3, then we're going to get to where we're going faster. It's still, it feels a bit counterintuitive. So we talk a lot about, like, look, we have 3 bullets this quarter, and what are we going to use our 3 bullets on? And that's the only 3 bullets you have in your gun. You don't get to have more. And so that's really helping us move towards the value we call one consciousness, right? Where we are really operating as a team and moving as a team and understanding our mission, and everyone's doing things in service of the mission in the same way.
Amazing. Rebecca, on that note, how do you effectively manage your time so you're fired on those 3 bullets?
I am a very scheduled person, so I have very defined time windows. I live by my calendar, and I have very defined windows and a very clear idea of where I want to spend my time. And I'm not afraid to reject things that don't fit into that. So for many years now, I haven't picked up my phone. I don't pick up my phone because it doesn't fit into those windows. And so if I'm going to connect with someone, it has to fit into the schedule that I want it to. So there's little things like that that I think are kind of high efficiency driving behaviors that I have incorporated over time that have really allowed me to maximize spending time on the things that I want to.
Those are such a great tip. Now, I'd love to hear what advice would you give to the folks out there about succeeding in 2024 and beyond?
I think, I like to say people who have started a company in the last 4 years have dealt with more than people over the last 20 years, right? There was a global pandemic, there was massive bank failures, there was 2 international wars break out, there's concerns about inflation hanging over our heads regularly. Like, that is more than people in the 80s saw in 10 years. So kudos to everybody who's running a business out there right now, because you I don't want to jinx it and say you've lived through it all, because I'm sure there's something else coming we're going to have to deal with. But you've lived through a lot of really turbulent times when people are going to look back on this 10 years from now. So for that, I think just give yourself some credit and, really, like we talked about earlier, don't view anything as failure, view it as bets. And some of them don't work out, but you're going to lean into the ones that succeed. And when you view everything through that lens, things become a lot easier.
On the note a little bit of the future, what do you see coming up that leaders should be aware of in the next, let's say, 1 to 2 years? We won't go too far out there.
For us, we think about, return of volume in the capital markets, because that's where we sit. So we've seen down markets for a couple of years, lack of financing from certain categories. Our category has continued to perform really well, digital capital. So really trying to get that message out there to people. The US election is coming up, so we're watching that
Uh-oh.
closely. Yeah. And and the economic impacts that might have in terms of investment behavior and how that changes things like inflation rates. So that's the kind of things on the 12-month horizon, in terms of global changes. I'm not going to try and predict what's going to happen with some of those things, but we're watching those carefully. And AI, generative AI, is really big for us in terms of implementing it in the business, and really should be for everybody. I think a lot about, if someone was to start DealMaker today, how would they build it? What would that look like? And making sure that we're constantly challenging ourselves to reinvent what we do in a wholly dramatically and different way on a regular basis, so that we can stay in our top of market position. I never want us to get too comfortable. Just because we have a market leadership position today doesn't mean we're going to have one 12 months from now, if we aren't constantly innovating and listening to our customers and giving them the car, not the faster horse.
I love that. Rebecca, of course, we'd love to give you some space to talk about DealMaker, and how can our listeners support you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I mean, we're really here to support founders. And so if there's something we can do to help them capitalize their business, feel free to reach out. The website is dealmaker.tech. We help folks raise capital digitally. So set up a landing page and then drive digital traffic and really build a large community around their business that they can also leverage. Sometimes it's with connections, sometimes it's with discounts on products, so that that community can really become not just a source of capital and future capital for the business, but also become a community that supports the business in achieving its objectives. So, for example, we have one company that's doing restaurant chain right now, and they have large communities in different states. And so with their discount codes, when they open new restaurants, they're going to be able to achieve revenue in those locations much faster than if they had to build up a customer base right from scratch. So it's different innovative things that the founders we work with are doing to use digital and use the power of a digital community to support their business and achieve outsized returns for themselves.
That's so cool, folks out there. Of course, dealmaker.tech. And then I've also dropped Rebecca's LinkedIn in the podcast notes as well. So you're welcome to connect with her there. Rebecca, we always have to ask this question, and it's our signature question. What do you want your legacy as a leader to be?
It's a great question. I think for us, the most important job is supporting founders. What they're doing is the hardest job. So if we can get more disruptors funded and help disrupt an industry that has a lot of blockers to it, the capital markets with the ivory towers have long not been transparent. And what we're fundamentally changing is for everyday Americans and citizens to be able to invest in private companies and achieve those returns. We feel really good about that. Capitalism gets a bad rap from a lot of people because of those barriers that it's traditionally had. And so when we change that and as we grow, we're fundamentally changing the innovation economy because we're changing the types of businesses that can get funded. VCs are looking for a very specific business model. Different institutional strategics are looking for something that benefits them. But when you fund from the crowd and from a community, they're looking for something different. And so that's going to result in different kinds of businesses getting funded that 5 to 10 years from now are going to have a dramatic difference on what North America looks like. And we're just excited to see what happens.
That's so cool. And of course, I'm also looking forward to seeing how we're going to be in 5 to 10 years. Rebecca, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Of course, folks, definitely connect with Rebecca on LinkedIn and check out dealmaker.tech. Obviously, for us, hit subscribe to Leadership Launchpad on your favorite podcast platform and share the show with any leaders in your life. For me, I think where I want to land the plane today is this similar theme that we've heard, at least for the last few weeks, is the growth mindset. It's finding avenues that are not the mainstream and disrupting what is there. And you can see from what Rebecca said is she's constantly learning, she's constantly evolving, she's constantly challenging status quo. And even that when she mentioned about how would someone found DealMaker today versus in 2018, that's constantly challenging how you're doing business. And it's not tied up in the ego of, well, this was my idea. It's always about that growth mindset. And I just want to leave folks with that because that's, as we know, it's an incredibly powerful way to always learn, always grow, create a successful life, not just business, but a successful life because it applies everywhere. Folks, thank you so much for listening. Of course, head on over to elitehighperformance.com for executive coaching, leadership development, keynote speaking. Rebecca, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you, Rob. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all next week.